this short lecture, we're going to talk about justified true belief and whether or not it's sufficient for knowledge and the counterexamples proposed by Edmund Gettier. Edmund Gettier is a famous epistemologist. In fact, he's a sort of strange case. He's only ever published a very scant few articles, which is somewhat comical given that usually in academia you have to publish or perish. You have to publish a lot, otherwise you don't get tenure. However, he published a famous 2-page article, so famous in fact that he was given tenure on the basis of it, and it sparked a huge debate in epistemology. Now, to begin with, remember the justified true belief analysis of knowledge, the traditional analysis of knowledge, basically says that knowledge, by definition, or like the concept of knowledge, is composed of the concepts of being justified, being true, and having a belief. Where we understand being justified is to have a good reason, or have evidence, or have a backed up belief that's reasonable or rational. Truth, obviously, the belief must correspond with the facts, and the belief, of course, must be an attitude that you take towards a proposition where you accept that the proposition is true. Now, the question of whether or not this analysis of knowledge is adequate is basically just a question of whether or not justification plus truth plus belief is enough to count as knowledge in every case. And so basically what's going on here, and what we're kind of interested in worrying about, is whether or not there are ever cases where something counts as knowledge but it's not a justified true belief, or where something counts as a justified true belief but it doesn't count as knowledge. Intuitively, if something counts as knowledge but isn't justified true belief, then the analysis has got to be all wrong. Similarly, the other way around. If something counts as a justified true belief, but it doesn't count as knowledge, then the analysis is all wrong. One way or the other, something doesn't capture the entire story. And if something doesn't capture the entire story, then we need to add something to the theory in order to explain what knowledge really is. Gettier ultimately gives a counterexample to the effect that a justified true belief isn't intuitively knowledge. It's something that's justified true and you believe it, but it doesn't really count as knowledge. The actual examples that Gettier gives in the paper that you read are actually a little bit confusing. They make the point fine, but they're a little bit confusing, and so I'm not going to try and explain them, because there are more intuitive cases that are more straightforward for explaining how or why you might think that having a justified true belief in some cases doesn't count as knowing. So the cases we're going to look at are the sheep in the field behind the rock case, the case of the static pyromaniac, and the fake barn county case. In the example of the sheep behind the rock case, imagine you are walking past a large field, and you look out into the field, and you see what looks to you as though it were a large sheep. As it turns out, there is a sheep in the field. However, what you're looking at is a large rock that happens to kind of be shaped in a sheep-like way. And the sheep that's in the field is standing right behind the large sheep-sized rock. Now, in this case, what you've come to believe upon looking out at the field is that there is a sheep in the field. What you've seen is a rock, and there's a sheep standing behind it. Now, on the basis of what you've seen, it seems that you are justified. What you looked at, it looked like there was a sheep in the field. You came to believe on the basis of what you looked at that there's a sheep in the field. So the belief seems justified because, you've got a good reason for believing that there's a sheep in the field. And your belief is true. There is a sheep in the field. It just so happens that, the thing that you were looking at wasn't the sheep. Now, in this case, the thought is you have a justified true belief, but you don't count as knowing that there's a sheep in the field, right? People tend to think, look, okay, in this case, you looked, you saw, you made a decision to believe, right? and you came to believe that there's a sheep in the field. However, you don't know that there's a sheep in the field, even though your belief is justified and, true. The reason here, in some sense, being that it's like an accident or something like that. So you don't have knowledge in this case. This is a classic Gettier case where it seems like there's justified true belief, but no knowledge. Second case, that of the static pyromaniac. Suppose we have a pyromaniac with a box of matches, and the box of matches has a strike pad, but with a little kind of piece of metal at the end of the box of matches, or maybe like the pyromaniac is wearing a ring or something like that. Now, what happens is, the pyromaniac thinks that he's lighting these matches when he's striking them across the pad. But what's actually happening is, there's something in the air and something in the metal that's on his hand or whatever that's causing a static electrical reaction. So you get the little static electricity zaps that's hitting the tip of the match just at the moment that the pyromaniac is, dragging the match across the strike pad. So now the pyromaniac believes that he is lighting the match, right? He drags it across. He has good reason for believing that he's lighting the match. He's dragging it across the strike pad, which normally would light the match. But in this case, for some reason, it's not. Maybe it's just a weak strike pad. But the match is still lighting, right? The match is lighting because of the static electricity that he isn't aware of. So now, again, what's going on here? Well, the pyromaniac believes that he's lighting the matches. He's got a justified belief in that he's lighting the matches, and in a sense, because in a way, he's causing the static electricity to light the matches. He is lighting the matches, right? However, his belief that he's lighting the matches, by dragging he just believes that he's lighting the matches in one way. His justification seems good, but he's wrong in a sense, right? Like he doesn't have the right way in which he's lighting the matches, right? So his belief that he's lighting the matches is true. He is justified. He's got good reason for thinking that he's doing it, and he believes that he's doing it. However, we would say he doesn't know that he's lighting the matches in this case, because in a way it's happening in some other deviant way. Finally, we have Fake Barn County. Now, imagine you have, imagine you are driving through the countryside, right? You're out in the middle of nowhere, like Ohio, and you're driving through the countryside, and unbeknownst to you, you enter Fake Barn County. Now, in Fake Barn County, there are lots and lots of barn facades, right? And what's a barn facade? Well, somebody basically set up a fake barn side really close to the freeway or the road so that it looks like there's a barn where there's not a barn, right? And they're doing this for, scenic reasons or who knows what. But you have no idea, right, that you're in Fake Barn County. Now, the idea here is basically what's going on. You're driving through Fake Barn County, and you're seeing all these fake barns, and you're like, oh, these are so nice. I want to get a picture. And eventually you see one and you pull off and you go up to get a picture in front of the barn. It just so happens that you're actually standing in front of one of the only real barns in Fake Barn County, right? Now, what's going on here? Well, you don't know that you're in Fake Barn County. So you think that you have good reason to think that all of the barn facades that you've been seeing have just been barns. You come to believe that the thing that you're standing in front of is a barn, and you're having your picture taken, right? Now, in this case, it seems like you have a good reason for thinking that you're standing in front of a barn, right? And in any other case where you would be standing in front of a barn, it'd look exactly the same. You just happen to be in Fake Barn County, where pretty much like 99.9% of the barns are, they're not really barns, they're barn facades. They're 99.9% of the things that look like what you're standing in front of are fake barns. They're barn facades. But you just happen to have stood in front of the only real one, right? Now, in this case, you have a justified true belief that you're standing in front of a barn. And yet, it seems that you don't. We don't want to say that you know that you're standing in front of a barn, right? Partly because you don't know that you're in Fake Barn County, and you just kind of randomly, by happenstance, happened to get to the only real barn that was in Fake Barn County. Now, yeah, again, this is supposed to be a kind of Gettier example in which you've got some justified true beliefs about this barn. However, we don't want to say that you know that you're standing in front of a barn. Now, much of epistemology since Edmund Gettier published his famous paper has been an attempt to solve this problem. It seems really plausible that justification, truth, and belief are necessary conditions to know something. You need to have each of these things. But there seems like there needs to be something else. There needs to be something else that gets added to the JTB analysis that solves for these kinds of weird cases in which you get kind of lucky in the way that you're justified or lucky in the way that your belief is true. And nobody has come down on a solution at this point for thinking one way or another. But there are a few different suggestions that are interesting, right? So one suggestion is what's called the no defeaters clause, where the no defeaters clause is, what you need is a justified true belief where there's no defeaters in the vicinity, right? Like for your justification. So like in the fake barns case, right? The defeater in the vicinity for your justification is that you're in Fake Barn County, right? And so in that case, that defeater ruins the justification. So ultimately the idea here is that you think that you're justified, but there's a defeater that, if you had known more, you would be aware of, and so your justification wouldn't really be good, and so you wouldn't know. Now, that's one possibility, but it's a complicated case because it doesn't always work in some of the other situations and some of the other counterexamples. Similarly, people have suggested that your justification needs to come about on the basis, on some sort of true basis. Your justification can't come to you on some sort of false underlying premise. And this is, this would handle like the static pyromaniac case, right? Because the person thinks that they falsely think that they're lighting the match, dragging it on the track, on the drag pad on the matches. And so, the basis for their justification in thinking that they are lighting the match is incorrect. Now, there are a number of different solutions where each of these just add a further condition to the JTB analysis in order to solve the Gettier problem. And this sort of debate has dragged on and on for quite a while up till now, and I don't want to sort of bog us down in discussing the intricacies of it. If you were to take a class in epistemology, you would definitely discuss this. However, what we can do sort of to just move on from this, because these cases are fun and interesting to think about, but not worth spending too much time worrying about, is that there's got to be something that can be added to the justification true belief criterion for something to count as knowledge. And whatever that thing is, we'll just call it X. Whatever that thing is, well, that's going to give us an adequate solution or analysis of what knowledge is. So knowledge, in the end, we can kind of say here with relative assuredness that knowledge is justified true belief as long as it solves the Gettier problem. And with that, we can move on to our discussion of the nature of justification.